Yo, what's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Vitamin C's, your regular dose of Celtics content. As usual, I'm your boy Adam Taylor, and as usual, I'm joined by my homie, compadre, co-host in crime, Mr. Tim Shields. Today, we're going to be talking about some news that broke overnight from Shams over at The Athletic. The Celtics will face the Philadelphia 76ers on Christmas Day. So, not breaking news, but it's the first piece of scheduled news that we get, and it's the Sixers. It's a rivals matchup. The Sixers project, and I've got some thoughts on this that we can go into, but the Sixers project to be a serious threat in the East. All being well, if both teams are healthy coming into that game, maybe with the exception of Porzingis, maybe you don't see him till January, I don't know. But all being well, assuming both teams are considerably healthy, Paul George is healthy, Embiid is healthy, Tatum, Brown, Jrue, Derrick, Al, then I think we're in for a really good Christmas Day game.
Yeah, and honestly, Christmas Day games are a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I remember all of the years of, going against the Knicks or the Bucks or Lakers. Those are like the really fun matchups, especially because, you're hanging around with family. Those kind of games are always fun to watch. And I think this is like a marquee matchup. You look at the East right now, and Philly's one of the teams that took like a big step forward in terms of the roster moves. Landing Paul George, you've got Joel Embiid coming back, getting healthy slowly but surely. That's a really, really fun matchup to watch. And I think from like a Philly perspective, they've got to be hungry to prove themselves, especially after, coming short again. And so that's always a cool matchup too. Like historically, these are two teams that have constantly battled it out. And Christmas Day, it's a perfect game for these guys, I think, in my opinion. It's a good matchup.
What excites me the most is Tatum always ups his game against Paul George. So having that battle happen between the Sixers and the Celtics, rather than it being a Clippers game or rather than it being with the Thunder or wherever, it's, we're going to get the best version of Jason Tatum versus the best version of Paul George, assuming both are healthy, in a marquee matchup on one of the biggest basketball days in the calendar year. And that day is Christmas. So everyone's going to be full with food. They're all going to have had a nice day with family. Hopefully some drinks are flowing. It's going to be hella fun because seeing Tatum go off against the Sixers is always enjoyable. Seeing him go off against the Sixers because he's upping his game against Paul George is just going to be ridiculous, dude. Because PG is still like the gold standard of two-way forwards, right? Like everybody that, like the younger guys that are coming in right now, they all grew up idolizing Paul George. Now, for me, he's not the same player he once was, but he's still an elite two-way guy. Tatum is arguably better now, or at least on that level. I'd argue that he's better than Paul George at this point in Paul George's career. Some people might disagree. Jaylen Brown is also there, and it's going to be interesting when you look at matchups. Like Tyrese Maxey will probably get picked up by Jrue Holiday, maybe Derrick White, maybe they'll put this is all subject to change, right? Al Horford will take on the Embiid responsibilities. Tatum will probably face off against Paul George offensively, but I'd expect Jaylen Brown to be the guy that picks up Paul George defensively. So we get to see both Celtic stars go to battle against PG and against the Sixers.
Yeah, and I think especially when I'm like just looking at the rest of the roster, because it's good to remind myself like,
yeah, a lot changed.
They've made some. Yeah, I mean, and also like Reggie Jackson.
Yeah.
They picked up Reggie Jackson. That's a big pickup. They've got Caleb Martin, KJ Martin, Kelly Oubre's still there. Adding Paul George in, you've got another year of Tyrese Maxey learning. You've got their top pick, Jared McCabe. And I always like to do like a little bit of a roster refresh just to have a look at the like whole team as a whole, because it's easy to say, wow, they added Paul George, but like they really fleshed out that roster.
Yeah, they added a lot of veteran talent. The problem is a lot of those guys are questionable in terms of health. I do think that picking up Caleb Martin was a good pickup, especially for when you're playing against the Celtics, because he's just another one of those guys that somehow finds a new gear against Boston, and it's just like, how are they letting him go off the way he's going off? He didn't really have that in the opening round of the Eastern Conference. He didn't really have that in the opening round of the playoffs, though. But overall, like he's a good pickup, a good solid pickup. Reggie Jackson, a good solid pickup. Paul George obviously leads the way there. Andre Drummond is another guy that will be interesting just because of the physicality he brings. Like, do you think the Celtics try and match him up against Nemi because Nemi's more physically strong than what Cornet is? Or do you think you go a little bit smaller and try and get underneath Drummond by going with Tillman, who's got a lower center of gravity, but is arguably just as, if not stronger than Nemi?
I think it might go with Tillman if I was looking at that matchup. But again, it also projects to see, like, again, we've talked about it, and maybe it's something we break down a little bit in an episode, because we've talked about after the injury with Porzingis, how are they going to handle those big man minutes? And that's actually a really good matchup to look at, especially if you don't know whether or not Porzingis is going to be back by Christmas Day. And like they said that he might be back around December, but I'm still not convinced. They might take like a slow roll with that, But I think Tillman deserves a crack just because of his physical nature. Defensively, he brings a lot of versatility, so you kind of keep some of that, especially with the strength. But I also think that Nemi has that athleticism that you I
control
love to
the boards
watch
against somebody like Drummond.
And it's exciting, he's one of those guys that can be a high flyer. Lately, I feel like, especially this past season, they did a lot to try and find guys, in the dunker spot and get a little like alley oops or just offensive boards, putbacks, that kind of thing. And so it'd be exciting to see if they try to do that against Philly, especially if they've got Drummond and Embiid as their two centers, just because those guys are big and imposing, but they're not necessarily always fast.
Yeah.
So if you try to kind of like run them off the floor, you either go small or you go lanky, stretchy rim runner. And that's kind of what Kata does for you with that rim running. But if you were to try and go smaller, tougher, maybe you do go Tillman. So that's a fun matchup to look at.
It's definitely
honestly.
like that big rotation is going to be fun all the way up until Porzingis comes back. And then it's going to be interesting to see who wins out. So
then it becomes more fun.
Yeah. So shameless plug. I'm covering this at the moment for the Celtics Chronicle newsletter, which powers the podcast. The link's in the description below. So this week I've looked at what Tillman brings, how Tillman can play, fit into a rotation without Porzingis there. Maybe he gets minutes over Nemi. Maybe Nemi gets minutes over him. Today I've done the flip side and looked at Nemi against Cornet and Tillman. What they bring, what they're good at, what they're bad at. Click in that link below, subscribe, and get it sent to your inbox 5 times a week, Monday through Friday. Moving on, I do want to stick with this matchup just a little bit longer, just a minute or two more, just because I want to look at where you think Philly would have an advantage, right? So Embiid is an advantage for Philly. Without Porzingis there, if we assume that he doesn't play, Embiid is an advantage. They have the advantage in the middle of the floor. Embiid is an MVP caliber guy. Even if Porzingis is there, they probably still have the advantage, if we're being fair. I think Boston has the advantage in the guard area. I think that both the backcourt would be of Jrue and Derrick is just too good. I'm not sure, but can they had issues containing Maxey during the regular season last year. Maxey's physicality, his ability to run at pace in transition. He can create off the bounce a bit more than he used to be able to. He can barge through you guys. He was creating a lot of secondary and tertiary rotations on penetration. I'm interested to see what he adds to his game coming into the season. I still think the Stock Exchange are too good defensively for him. And overall, as a collective, the advantage is with Boston backcourt to backcourt. But Maxey is definitely a swing factor for Philly if everybody's healthy, because he creates so much for everybody else by being this controlled chaos type of guy, right? And I think that he's honestly one of the more fun guys to watch in the East right now. One of the more fun younger guys to watch in the East, obviously below Tyrese Halliburton.
Yeah, we love Hallie a lot.
We do.
But Maxey is in that, he's getting to that point.
Yeah,
I think he's got a couple more layers to his game for sure. But he fits that kind of archetype that's given the Celtics problems over the past few years, like the smaller, shiftier guards. It was more of a problem when Smart was here because, honestly, I think Marcus was starting to lose some of that defensive acumen after getting DPOY, just because he put his body through the ringer.
Yeah, he lost a step, half a step.
Season. Yeah, and it's in a league where you've got guys like Maxey who are so young, athletic, explosive. That half step can mean something in these matchups. But I think because you've got Jrue, you've got Derrick, those are two guys who have been able to manage those kind of matchups very well. I think having two guys that are high defensive caliber players makes a difference when you're going against younger players who do have the athleticism, but have some room to make up with for experience. And I think Jrue being, the defensive player that he is, and Derrick being the defensive player that he is, it's better than just having Smart and Derrick. You've got two guys who are capable of playing off of each other defensively. And when they're on the floor, they make, you look at Team USA, they make the team better just with their defensive presence. I think the biggest thing is going to be, it goes back to the big man matchup a little bit, only because I look at the wings that they've added and some of the wings that they've got. You know, they had Kelly Oubre. Kelly Oubre is still very much a 3-point threat. He's a very capable 3-point shooter. Eric Gordon, he used to be. I'll be interested to see if he has a little bit of more of uptick, I guess, with Philly, because Daryl Morey just loves to go get his former Houston Rockets players and bring them in. And then you've got Caleb Martin, and also you got Reggie Jackson. So, like, you've got some guys who are capable of giving you problems. The reason I mentioned those guys specifically is because I think of, like, kick-out opportunities. If they're not able to put Joel Embiid one-on-one with somebody on defense, or if they're, you got to put him in a spot where you've got not necessarily two men on him, but you've got someone waiting to, try and swipe at the ball. Like, it entirely depends on how much the defense is focused on Joel Embiid, because if he's able to pull two guys, one of those guys, like a Caleb Martin or a KJ Martin or an Oubre or, a Gordon, gets open on the perimeter and you're giving them open perimeter looks, that's where you're going to run into problems against Philly, I think. And obviously Paul George factors into that too, but like the rest of this roster too, like people are going to pay attention to defense with Paul George. Like they're going to be on him defensively, but it's these other guys that, that third player that relocates and gets open on the wing. You have to worry about those kick out opportunities. So like defensively, I'm interested to see if they're just going to play Philly straight up. Like, are they going to go one-on-one? Are they going to have doubles? Or are they going to try and, make Embiid go onto the block and they've got a defender waiting there to try and swipe at the ball? Like, that's really where I'm wondering, because these kind of wing players are really what creates problems for the Celtics, is if you've got a guy who's just ready to pick up a messy rebound that gets kicked out and then he just shoots a three.
Yeah, I think for me, it's best if you stay straight up, but you go cross match on Embiid. So you put a Jrue Holiday on him. And then when they try and run Joel in actions, you switch Jrue Holiday for whoever big's on the floor. And you kill that action, you kill the pace, you take away the spacing, you also take away any idea of a mismatch. In terms of PG, like I said earlier, I think that JB just picks him up straight up. I think JB takes on that responsibility. I'd expect Tatum to be the one attacking him offensively, JB to be the one picking him defensively, but both of them being interchangeable on each side of the floor, right? Because both are at a level now where they're at or above or slightly below where PG is. So it's quite an even matchup. Having two guys that can play like that versus one is going to be a major advantage for the Celtics. By cross-matching as well, hopefully you're not having to worry about sending two at Embiid, which negates the kickouts that I like to call them spray actions. You spray the ball out after the drive. It negates that quite a lot. Now, obviously, if you are sending two, then it's all about playing next man defense. The next man sinks in. Where's that next opportunity coming from? Who's helping off? Can we X out? Can we split the difference? It's all principle-based at that point. I think for me, the bigger question is, how do you guard Embiid? Like, okay, so you cross-match, but when he's matched up with a big, do you guard him at the level of the screen? Do you drop below the level of the screen? Are you trying to hedge? Are you showing? Dependent, and the Celtics generally play drop, switch, or at the level. They don't really show too much. They do a little bit. They hedge, depending on the ball handler. But I think that's where you start to get advantages over Embiid by just wearing him down, being physical with him, meeting him at the level of the screen and forcing him to try and fight through that contact. How often are you sending taggers to try and slow him down as he rolls to the rim? Who is your tag man? Is it somebody like Tillman that's really going to create that impact on the tag? Or is it going to be someone like Pritchard that he's there and there's a bump and Embiid slows down, but Pritchard's in the stands wondering what freight train just hit him? So a lot of it's going to be systematic in terms of what Mazzulla wants them to do. I do expect to see some tweaks from what we saw last year to this year. Otherwise, I also think we're going to see some internal development from quite a lot of this roster. But the Sixers are definitely a bigger problem than what they were last season, which has me thinking I don't expect this to be a series sweep, like a regular season series. I could even understand if it gets split. As long as the Celtics don't lose the regular season series to Philly, I don't mind if you split it. I don't mind if you win by one. Just don't lose. I'm cool, man. Whatever. But please win on Christmas Day. Don't make my Christmas Day go down the hill because you decided to rest 8 guys.
Yeah,
You
amen to that.
know what I mean? You bring up half of the G League. We're watching Jrue Peterson and fucking JD Davison against Tyrese Maxey and Embiid. I don't want that.
I don't think anyone wants that.
No.
I definitely don't think the NBA wants that.
I tell you who does want that. Jrue Peterson and JD Davison, they want that. You know what I'm saying? With that, everybody, we're going to leave you to have a great day. We'll be back later to talk about some other stuff going on in the Celtics world. Until then, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Head over to the Celtics Chronicle and sign up there. It's free. There is a paid option, but that's optional. There is a free option that, just type in your email address, click subscribe. It's free. Tim, anything you want to say before we bounce?
Cheers. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.